Okay, so look, I think let's get started. So just for everyone's information, I have pressed the record button. So this will be getting recorded. So if some people haven't been able to make it, or if you wanted to watch back over it, you definitely can. So the way it's going to work today is we're going to take a minute to introduce each of the panel members. So more specifically, who they are, what they do, and what types of questions that you could be asking them today. As they're introducing themselves, please feel free to enter your questions into the chat box because we have Rob in the background who's going to document those questions. And then we're going to be able to go through all the questions and ask the most appropriate panel member to be able to answer those questions. We do have a slight disclaimer. During the current situation, it's moving very quickly. So the information is as accurate up until this point. And any advice given during this webinar is not legal advice. So Business Success Systems, Otto and Associates, Tag Financial and Happy HR can't be liable for the actions that you do take. Due to the nature of the questions, we will be answering the questions to the best of our ability, but if you do need to make quite significant decisions, please feel free to contact any one of the panel members directly so they can understand the context of your situation and give you very, very specific advice. So at the end of this webinar, we will be sending out ways for you to contact them directly, a recording of this video so that you can then continue the conversation if you need. So for those of you that don't know me, my name's Troy Eadie. So I'm the CEO of Business Success Systems. And so look, the reason why we put this webinar on is because all of us panel members have been getting asked a lot of questions from our clients around what is happening in the current environment and how to best handle the situation. So with Warren, Michelle, and Christopher's help, we're going to do our best to be able to answer all these questions to give you the support that we need. So before we get started again, if I could just encourage everyone to stay on mute, put your questions into the chat, and also turn your cameras off just to provide the best experience. So what we'll do is we'll just take a minute. We'll go to Warren first, then to Michelle, and then to Chris. So Warren, would you like to introduce yourself, who you are, what you do, and the types of questions that people could ask you throughout this session?
Yeah, thanks, Troy. Thanks for that. Just a quick bit of background. My name's Warren Otter. I'm the founder of Otter and Associates. I help and work with SMEs. My background has been a business owner in the manufacturing space for over 26 years, so I totally understand what it's like at the moment to be an owner of a business in these types of situations. Obviously not exactly this one, but did start back in '89. We had that recession we had to have. So my focus today will be helping people around questions about leadership, looking after yourself, looking after your team, and actions going forward to make sure you're in the best position coming out of this.
Okay, great. Thank you, Warren. Michelle. Hello, Michelle.
Hi, everyone. My name's Michelle Griffiths. Oh, sorry, yep. My name's Michelle Griffiths. I'm from Tag Financial Services. So we're an accounting and financial services firm. What that means is we've actually got specialty in relation to business and tax, specialists in relation to superannuation. We've got a finance and loans division and an investment advisory and wealth division. So any questions that relate to the financial side of things, we'll be here to answer some questions for you. I can even see some coming along now that we are getting asked a lot. Anything relating to the government stimulus packages and things like that, we'll be talking about all that stuff during the session.
Beautiful. Thank you, Michelle. And Chris, welcome.
G'day, everybody. Thank you very much for the opportunity to be part of this today. So well done to Troy for getting this all together. My name is Chris Smith. I'm CEO of Happy HR. Happy HR essentially is a company that provides a technology platform to ensure that you've got your HR house in order with contract policies, positions, and a whole raft of tech that helps people run their HR in the cloud. As part of that, they also get HR advice and support, which has obviously been quite huge at this particular point in time. We've certainly been very busy.
Yeah.
Other types of questions you may have today, we've been very busy, which would
Hey,
be
I want
around
you both to go and
COVID-19.
read for an hour, all right?
Around questions around COVID-19, stand downs. You may have questions around awards, redundancies, and how to have these negotiations about reduction of hours and so forth. So certainly armed with lots of information there. So if you have any questions about staff and those things, I'm here to help.
Beautiful. Thank you very much, Chris.
Pleasure.
Okay, so let's just recap. So what we're going to be doing is please enter your questions into the chat box. Please do your best to stay on mute, just so that when the panel members are answering, their answers can be as clear as possible. We're seeing the questions come through now. So what we're going to do now is I'm just going to start at the top. We're going to be answering some of the questions and giving all the panel members some time to be able to respond. So the first question here that we have is, what special business loans and conditions are available to small to medium business? Michelle.
Okay, I'll take that one.
Yep.
I'll take that one, Troy.
Thank you.
One of the things that the government has done is obviously create time. So obviously that's everyone's priority. The problem that we have is that that was announced, but now we are waiting for the banks to work out how they're actually going to deal with that. So to this point, where you're going to go for that is going to be going to the banks. The problem we've got is the banks haven't really even worked out how they're actually going to manage it and what the conditions are or what the rates are going to be. This is something that we've actually got a great level of frustration about right at the moment, because people need these financial assistance packages now, but the banks are basically at the point where they've been given this money from the government at an interest rate of 0.25%. They're now starting to think about how much they're going to charge as an application fee for that process, what their process is going to be. And they're also talking about charging in excess of 4% interest on those loans when the time comes. So I guess probably part of our frustration is that the opportunity for the banks to do the wrong thing is there. And because of the speed that this is working, there's not a huge amount of oversight on that. So the bottom line is it's coming. It'll be from the banks. So stay in touch with your banks about that. But you're not going to get much traction on it just yet because the banks haven't even worked out how they're going to deal with it.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Michelle. So can I please just remind everyone, please stay on mute. Just got some people, I'm muting you and then you're turning your mic back on, just so that everyone can hear the panel members answer the questions clearly. It's best if everyone stays on mute. Next question is there any up-to-date information regarding commercial rent relief?
Okay. So this is another thing in relation to just how the world of money is going to be working through this process. The simple answer is that there is no guidance on this at the moment. I know an organisation, a fairly big organisation run by Solomon Lew, has basically closed down all their shops, and they've basically said to their landlord, "You're not getting any rent." That's basically it. At this point in time, it is up to each individual business to negotiate something with your landlord. Our recommendation is talk to your landlord earlier rather than later. Don't wait until it's completely necessary. You need to keep that dialogue open because it is going to be an individual negotiation. Now, a really important thing to remember here is that if we have the rent reducing or stopping for a period of time, of course, that's going to have a flow-on effect to the landlord, which has potentially catastrophic implications for them as well. This is where the banks have actually been really good. At the moment, they're basically, most of the major banks have actually got on their websites COVID-19 information packs, And I tested this myself personally with the bank that I operate with, and it literally took me less than 5 minutes to essentially lodge a claim, if you like, for financial hardship. I just ticked a box saying reduction of income, and then picked the option that I wanted to apply. In my instance, I just sort of said, oh, I'll have a 3-month holiday on my loan repayments. Once again, just by way of example. And that was lodged and submitted online. The message basically came back saying, if we've got any questions, we'll get back to you. Otherwise, we'll let you know. So once again, if you're starting to see, and if you think about it from the perspective of the flow-on effect, if you've got a tenant and they're not able to pay, or you're going to negotiate a reduction in their rental, then straight away you need to turn around and deal with your bank so that your cash flow situation doesn't strangle you. So this is about survival of the business at the moment. And these are the measures that are already starting to play in the community. You need to be aware of them. And once again, the earlier that you can start acting on these things, the better position your business is going to be in.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Michelle. This next question is for you, Chris. So there's been a lot of chatter about staff taking pay cuts or having some special arrangements between business owners. So, I'm assuming, so the situation is that potentially the business, there's been a reduction in the amount of work.
Just say that again, kindly, please, sir.
Yep. So I think the question is around how to handle staff during this situation due to shutdowns or reduction in the amount of work.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, everybody is asking lots of questions about, different scenarios. So a couple of scenarios to maybe consider is, number one, is my business in a mandated government shutdown situation like hospitality or a gym? If your business is in that situation, you can stand them down without pay, and then you can obviously work through whether you're going to do some leave entitlements and that sort of stuff, okay? Now, if you're in the boat that you're in manufacturing or you're in, another type of business that's not in a government mandated situation, then you really need to look at reducing their hours. And I look at it, I've been saying to people, it's a survive situation. So moving them, say, from 5 days to 3 and working that through, although it's difficult for the employee, the business needs to make these choices based on its forward projection, cash flows, and so on and so forth. Now, in this case, the employee rejects that, and we've seen very small amount of people reject it, but some have. But then you're forced with going, well, if I can't afford this person, then I need to consider redundancy. Then you need to go and get bespoke redundancy advice. There's a lot of myths around redundancy that people get very, very wrong, and I really implore you to get advice. We're certainly here to help anyone here today on this webinar, and certainly here to assist you in that. But get professional advice, like you're talking with someone like Tag Financial as a professional accountant. In this world, having a HR partner is just as important because advice is so complex.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. And so...
Can I just ask a follow-on question from that, if you don't mind?
Of course.
Yep.
With the, and this is sort of thinking about this from the business person's perspective, because of course we need to think about these things. As soon as you go down a redundancy path, that could actually finish up costing the employer more than a stand down. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, it all depends on whether it's a mandated stand down or a non-mandated stand down. So as an example, I've had some manufacturers calling today saying, I need to stand down my staff. And unfortunately, in that particular business, it's not mandated by government to stand down. He goes, well, the question was, can I stand down this group and keep this group? No, if it's a stand down, it's the stand down. Then you actually have to go that redundancy route if you need to reduce those costs, if the employees have not agreed to a wage reduction. So then it becomes a question, okay, who is the first to go, and strategically, who's got the biggest payment, who's got the smallest payment, and then working through. Now, in some cases, more than 15 employees, less than 15 employees, depending on their redundancy. Some awards, if you got lifted less than 15 employees, still have a redundancy. So you really need to get good advice on, is it stand down? Can I do that? Yes, no. Can I reduce hours? Yes, no. If that's not accepted, can I then, who's going to be the person who gets exited through redundancy first, second, third, fourth? So there's lots of questions there, and it is truly based on a strategy rather than anything else.
That answer your question, Michelle?
Yeah, look, I think that's exactly the guidance that we needed, to be honest. That distinction is actually super important, because I think there's a lot of businesses that are closing at the moment.
Yes.
But it may not actually be that criteria that actually qualifies for the stand down. So it's a tricky situation.
I'd argue.
If I could just,
I'll say go, Warren.
No, so I was going to say, if I can just jump in and support what you're saying, Chris, because I think one of the critical things at the moment, and the reason why a lot of business owners are probably honest at the moment, is actually reach out to your advisors. And this is not a pitch. This is reach out to your advisors, get the right advice, because you as a leader need to make decisive, timely decisions. And if you're making the wrong decisions, your staff are the ones that you're going to rely on when you come out the other end. And if you make shoot from the hip decisions that aren't compassionate to them, they may not want to follow you out the other end.
Yep.
So I think it's really important that you do reach out and get the right advice, not just for your own business survival, but short term, but also to be compassionate with the staff. So just
and also as a leader, if I could add to that too, Warren, I think what's also important for people to realise is I'm old enough, and Warren, you said you've been through the 89, so you're obviously old enough as well. But to go through that GFC in 2007, people waited too long to make aggressive cutbacks, and that was enough to wipe them out. My advice to anyone is, and Michelle will certainly, I'm sure, touch on this today, I'm sure, is step one, do your cash flows and know your budgets and slash as hard as you need to so you can still operate. Two, understand your employees' cash position, liabilities, and that sort of stuff. And then you need to cut hard and be aggressive so you can have a business at the end of this. At the end of the day, being a leader is being compassionate to yourself. I use the analogy, when you're on a plane that's going down, they say, put the oxygen mask on yourself first. So don't forget about your business and making sure that you're working as a team to get through this. And like you said, Warren, good leaders will tell it how it is, but be compassionate. And so they really can see that you do care, but we're all in this together, and there's actually no playbook. So you're right, Warren.
Can I add to that, because I think this is actually a really good stream of focus for every business person out there. Is I absolutely agree with wholeheartedly the context that you said, Chris, in relation to look at your cash flows, understand what your cash flows are, defer, control wherever you can, but you need to do it early. One of the things that we started in our business probably a month and a half ago was we came out with 3 essential themes, and we kept communicating that, particularly with our team, really early, and we haven't deviated from those 3 themes, and I'll share those with you. The first one was health and safety. That's no big surprise to anyone. So how do we make our workforce safe? How do we keep our clients as safe as we can? So there was a whole strategy that we rolled out in relation to that. The second prong was maintaining employment. So the business needs to survive, and we need to try to maintain everyone's employment, because everyone who is there, we want them to be there at the end. But how do we do that? So that was our second prong. And then the third prong was making sure that payments to employees and to service providers was maintained to the best of our ability. So once again, talking to your team early and preparing them for the fact that these were our focus points. That doesn't mean to say that there's not going to be cuts. It doesn't mean that there's not going to be changes, but they understand that, hey, if we keep paying you at full rates, or if we don't make changes, then the business is not going to survive, and therefore you're not going to have a job at the end of it. So there is actually kind of trying to get those types of messages, I think, to the team members so that they understand what the business is doing, how it impacts them, and preparing them for what is going to be an inevitable shutdown at some point. It's just a matter of when, it's not a matter of if. And then just having them understand where we're doing it and that we are actually making them a priority. So I think communication with the team, not just communicating them when you're about to, you know, stand them down or whatever, I think that's actually really important as well.
Mm. Yeah, it's a good time to
First,
pull together.
I know we've probably got questions.
Absolutely.
I know we've probably got some questions coming through, Troy, but just to add a little bit to that, the advice and the discussions I've been having with a number of private businesses over the last week too, apart from the obvious that you've been, not shouldn't say the obvious, but the thing you've been talking about there, Michelle, first of all is just your staff and your own health. Look after that, make sure you put everything in place. Cash flow is absolute king. You've covered that off, and make sure that you're actually being clear about your next week's cash forecast, a week after forecast. So I'm talking to businesses too about talking to their staff every day, stand-up meetings, quick, sharp meetings, communicate clearly with them, but make sure they're clear on getting to end of task. And when I talk about end of task, if there's any work in front of you, complete it as quick as possible, get it out the door, satisfy your client's needs and start invoicing it. Because there are some people saying, oh, let's stretch the work out. And it's silly because you're not going to get paid for it and you might not get to complete it either. So we've got to help staff change the mindset sometimes to end of task today, every day, stand at quick meeting, get to end of task, finish it, invoice it, get it out, follow up. But also I'm going to add to that, I've just come across a few clients in the last week who have fortunately got some really large clients. I can name them, being like the BHP, the Anglo-Americans and so forth, who are actually paying forward. They're actually making very significant payments, which they'd normally pay on 60 days. They're paying them 21 and 30 days. And so if you've got those big clients in your network, reach out to them and get them to pull the payments forward, because the government has asked large business to pay SMEs on time or early. So that's also been a leader, is get on the front foot and get on the phone to your larger clients. And also some of those larger clients may have some closed down or some quiet periods right now. Ask what you can do for them while they're quiet, because they might have some time to actually, you can help them with. So just some thoughts there for people to go through.
No, that's great. Thank you, Warren. Okay, so the next question we've got here is around the government support in regards to the next BAS. Michelle, are you able to handle that question for us?
Yeah, so basically what is happening is that depending on your BAS obligations, there's a range of things that this all kind of connects into. So number one is the I'll call it the grant or the gift of the 25 up to 25,000 that has now moved up to 50,000 for the next BAS. So this is for the March year end, the March quarter's end BAS that you'll be able to get access to. And there's also at the same time, because when we first saw this announcement, we were like, well, that's great, because we weren't actually going to pay the tax office at all for that BAS because we need to preserve our cash flow. They're kind of last in the list, so to speak, because we'll deal with them later. Now, the reality is that they're also extending when you have to pay your BAS as well. So it's not that you have to pay your BAS and then we'll give you this gift. There's a deferral of the March BAS, as well as the fact that they will essentially hand some money to you. Now, the problem, of course, is the timing of when you're going to get that money, because it's not going to be until the end of April that that money is likely to land in your bank account. And that's on the assumption that the systems at the ATO and what have you are in place and robust enough to be able to do that. So that's absolutely something that you need to be on top of, because that's a significant cash injection, as well as the deferral of what you would normally be paying as your March BAS. So if you're a business owner, please don't just ignore the March BAS, because that was where a lot of our business owners were starting from. They were going, I'm not going to deal with it, I've got bigger fish to fry. No, you need to make sure you do that BAS, but then what you need to do at the same time is make sure you get the deferral of the payment of that, and that will trigger the receipt of that grant. And that's going to be critically important to you by the time we get to the end of April.
And can you share more specifically around what the grant is in relation to the BAS?
Yeah, look, I'll make some, there's so many conditions and variables on this, but in really broad terms, if you have a pay-as-you-go bill, so in the old terminology, the group tax, if you like, that you would normally pay on your March BAS, basically the government is going to give you up to $50,000 back. So they're basically going to pay you what you would normally have paid to the tax office because you've withheld it from your employees. The government is essentially going to pay that back to you instead. So it's actually a double negative. So it's really good. If you don't have a pay as you go amount, or your amount isn't as high as that, then they're going to make at least a $10,000 payment. So once again, I've got some links to the TAG website has a number of blogs. But for any business owners going through this, we've been quite prolific with our blogs over the last week, but they're also very specific. And there's one particularly in relation to a summary of the announcements for business in relation to COVID-19. So Troy's going to mention that, put a link to the blog page on our website, but it will actually go through and it gives you more detail. And if you want more detail, or if it's not clear enough, get in touch with me and I'll get more information to you.
Right, great, thank you. The next question we have is, if your own self-managed super fund owns the building, can the business stop paying rent?
This is a good one. We actually had this question that we ran past the auditors that we've got in the super, in our team that we use. And the simple answer is communicate with your accountant, communicate with the auditor of your super fund. The general rule is that you have to keep paying your rent, but you have to pay commercial rent. Now, where this distinction comes in is if it is commercial at the moment, that there are rent holidays or rent discounts happening in that business world, then you have a justification that you can potentially rely on in order to do that reduction or have a rental holiday for a set period of time if you are the tenant for your own superannuation funds building. The key then is making sure that you put in place the documentation to prove when the auditor comes along that, hey, I didn't do the wrong thing, I was just acting with my tenant in a commercial manner, even though my tenant is essentially myself. So really important to talk to your auditor if you're going to do that, and they will give you some guidance on what information they want from you to be able to prove that you're not doing anything that's not commercial. The example we were using is they wanted to get a letter from an agent to basically say that, hey, this is commonplace and this is what's happening in the commercial industry at the moment in relation to rents. So that's just an example, but you need to talk to the auditor that's auditing your fund because they're the ones who are going to have to sign off on it.
Okay. Thank you, Michelle. So the next question I've got is most likely for you, Chris. If my business is classified as essential, but my cash flow has dropped, can I stand down people or is it a redundancy?
The short answer is because it's not not a business that can stand down at this point. Unfortunately, you'd have to be looking at reduction of wages and then or redundancy. Another thing that I've been doing for businesses in that situation, as wages in Australia have been creeping up over the last 12 months, is let's say, for example, Johnny Smith, who works for you, his award is, and this happened to a financial services client today, is the award for this particular financial advisor was $51,000 a year. And this person, the market value for someone in this position was actually much higher, 90,000+. So what they've done is actually we've negotiated that employee down to the award. So they're still working the normal hours, but they've been negotiated down to the actual award rate. It's not great for that particular employee, but this employee does understand that that's the scenario that we are all in. Again, there's no playbook, and we've done a provision in their contract to review this on a quarterly budget based on business growth again and so forth. and the goal is to get them back to the wage that they were on. So that's one way of doing it as well.
Okay, thank
Can
you.
I ask a question just to follow up from that, Chris, because this is what we're hearing from a lot of clients as well.
Yes, ma'am.
If you are going to negotiate, let's call it a reduction in people's pay rates, hopefully only for a minimal period of time, we're hoping, what's required? Like what's the documentation that you need to do around that? Is the verbal discussion sufficient? Do you need to have it in writing? Is it a new contract? Can you make some comments on that?
Absolutely. So another good question youth one would come up today. So very simple. So if the negotiation, like I just said for the financial advisor, then they've been issued with a new contract with a new pay rate with a provision in their Schedule 1 that says this will be reviewed on this date. It is the goal to get back to the rate that we were paying you. However, the business's COGS are at X, and when they're back to where they are, we'll be able to pay. So it may be that we may step it up in 3 months to 65, and then it goes up to 85, and then it goes up to that. So it'll be about each time reissuing a new contract, so they've got it in writing when things are going to happen. A lot of people are just giving letters. Although that's not illegal, you want to be in a position where you've got a contract that says this is what you've agreed to. Okay, so I'd certainly recommend the contract way is a better way to go.
I guess if we get to the point where we've got a shutdown on our hands that's broader than that, actually being able to have face-to-face communication and being able to exchange documentation of that nature is going to be even more and more difficult. Have you got any ideas or any tips on how that might be dealt with if we're working in a virtual office
if you have
type
happy
scenario?
HR, it'd be one click of a button.
I was just about to say that.
Look, it literally would be one click of a button and it's done. It is absolutely brilliant, the system. But the way you'd probably do it now is if you haven't got happy HR, perhaps you do a DocuSign, Adobe Reader, something like that would be something, but you'd certainly stipulate if it was done through an Adobe that the signature that's done electronically is going to substitute my signature. There's actually laws around e-signatures, you would know, Michelle. So you've got to make sure the documentation states that the electronic signature that's affixed is going to be governable. So you need to make sure that's covered. A lot of people won't do that, which means that contract is done. Doesn't mean anything without that being stipulated within the electronic contract. So again, that's a real good tip there, guys. Be very careful. So if they could print it, file it, scan it, send it back, that might be another way of doing it. There's those old-fashioned ways of snail mail if necessary. At the end of the day, having a contract is going to be best practice.
Okay, great.
Have you found and have you been starting to talk to employers about having pay reductions, not down to an award rate that happens to be lower, but just taking an approach where they're saying, hey, everyone's going on to 50% or 75% of whatever you're currently on. Do your answers change at all if the amount that is being negotiated is less than the amount that an award might be? Does that complicate things?
Yeah, first of all, you should not be negotiating for less than any award, because that will mean that you are putting yourself in a situation where you're underpaying, and that will be certainly frowned by the commission. I suppose you look at employee A and employee B, okay? Employee A, I've been pulled into many crisis board meetings this week, and they pulled me in as an advisor to assist them with lots of matters, but HR being one of them. With that, I've said to the people who are on executive salaries, we're going to do some cutbacks here, guys. You may not like it, and it means that you might need to, not go on that holiday or whatever it might be, but the people in executive summaries, they're getting paid so far in excess of the award. The business has said we're going to, as a team, as the executive team, negotiate and cut down our salaries for every executive in the company. I've had those negotiations this week, okay? And still do the same hours that you're doing to try and get the business going. Second negotiation is, look, employee A, they're getting paid whatever they're getting paid. We're going to reduce the hours and the wage. So let's say, as to make it easy, they're getting paid $100,000. We're going to reduce the wage to $60,000 during this time, but you're only working 3 days. So it's pro rata and it works out. So that's the best way to manage those, in my opinion. I have, and I will see this happen, which is really unfortunate. In some businesses, they've been negotiated from the wage they're on down to the award wage. And then if that doesn't work, you need to do a second round of cutbacks. Then they're going to negotiate it down to less days in the week. And that's an even duplicate cut, if that makes sense. We will see that in some industries, unfortunately.
One of the things, I'll just make an observation here, and this is probably then having employers think about this in terms of what other government relief or government stimulus has been announced at the same time. If you start getting to the point where you're cutting someone's wage back and then their hours back by such a significant amount, you just need to be aware of what is available for them if they were to go on the job seeker benefits. Because if they were going to be eligible for that, they may actually be better off with you having them stood down or made redundant, let's call it, because the employee may actually be better off with the amount of money that they're likely to get from the government on the job seeker allowance.
So, Michelle,
that's
just
something
on
that's another consideration.
Yeah, Michelle, just on that, can you quote the numbers? I understand the numbers are $1,050 a fortnight. If you're earning less than that, you can get, is it $550 a fortnight from the government?
Well, it's $550 from the government. That's just the top-up amount. That's on top of the normal job seeker amount. So the amount that you're likely to be getting is closer to $1,100 a fortnight as the total job seeker payment for the next 6 months. The normal job seeker payment is about half of that.
Correct me if I'm wrong, the employee can earn up to $1,050 a fortnight and then be eligible for those other payments. Is that correct?
That is correct, but there may be some adjustment to how much of the $1,100 per fortnight they get from the government, depending on how much they earn as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, that is something to consider, as you've both just been saying, when you're starting to manage and be compassionate about your workforce. Because I'm finding I've got a lot of clients who are in the space that, as you were saying, Chris, they're probably not going to be, or not yet going to be told to shut down, and they're trying to balance their teams around. And I've also been saying to be really mindful about the fact in 3, 4, 6 weeks' time, if you're still trying to get product out the door and some of your workforce is crook, you can't just put a whole lot off and then have to call them back if they're not available, if they've gone and found other work. Mm-hmm. So it's possibly about rotation and making them aware they get some other funds in the door during that time.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And that, again, it's just being a compassionate, open leader and getting people to the table and talking to them about it.
Yeah.
And I think the other thing, Warren, that goes along with that is that there's no one size fits all. It may be that the answer for one employee is very different from the answers from employee number 2 or group number 1 versus group number 2. So this is where every business is different, every employee situation is different, and you just really need to think your way through this. And the earlier you can start strategizing and thinking through what your next step is, rather than having to make the decision and then you're acting on it on the spot, just going to put you in a much better frame of mind, and you're going to be able to make better decisions if you're ahead of it rather than reacting as much.
I agree. And just to add one more aspect, I know it's a HR area, but I'm talking to clients around this space as well. If you happen to be in some form of industry long service leave fund, through building funds or whatever it may be, and you've got staff that are covered by that, some staff are actually willing now to take the long service leave component, which the industry fund covers, rather than the employer having to cover. So there's another way of actually balancing out your team if by agreement that people are happy to bring some of their long service leave forward.
If I could mention, like, what you're both saying is you need to be informed before you make decisions, right? So everybody out there listening to this and whoever watches this recording, it's important to stop and don't be emotional, and get advice from people that are able to help you, and look at every nook and cranny before you make the decision. So who's on long service, what role is redundant, what group versus this group, what's the sequential order of payments, how can our cash flow sustain that plan, and so on and so forth. it's really, really very important to look at the sequence of your decisions as well as the decisions themselves.
Look, I totally agree with you. And I just want to touch a little bit more, if I can, briefly on business owners specifically, because we already know that for business owners, it's a lonely job. And at this stage, it could be even tougher because you've got to stand up, put a brave face on, know that you're about to fall off a cliff potentially. But you still need to have that compassion, clarity, be adaptive and pivot if you can. But please, please reach out, as everyone's been saying, to your trusted advisors, to other people, but also talk to other business owners. We're all in it the same. Yeah. This is not like it's an individual company's problem. It's everyone's issue. So the mental health and the physical health of business owners is critical, as you've all got to lead your teams, and the clearer you can make decisions, and by bouncing it off other people as well, you'll all be a lot better for it. I just can't, and get some exercise in.
Yeah.
Yes. And so, Michelle, so isn't it true too that the subsidies are based on how much you're paying your employees? So if you stand everyone down, or if you're not paying wages, then your subsidy also decreases. So there's a bit of a calculation you need to do. So because the government is doing their best to give businesses money to pay their team so that they don't go on to the benefits. Is that right?
Correct.
Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah. So basically, once again, it comes back to, if you're not paying any staff, then you're not withholding any tax from their wages, and therefore that is the amount that the government is going to essentially subsidise you for. Therefore, if you stand down on your employees and you've got half the wage cost, you've also then got half or less of the pay as you go, and therefore you may be entitled to less as you hand out. Now, the other thing, and I sort of saw one of the questions that was popping through the chat box, so I just wanted to double back around on that that subsidy that I was talking about, and I was focusing on the March quarter because that's the one that's closest to us. But there's also another $50,000 that's going to be available in the June quarter as well, if you pay quarterly. If you pay monthly, then it's the June, July, September quarter or whatever. But once again, more detail in our blogs and what have you. But there is a $50,000, which is what we're focusing on straight away because it's more immediate. But then there's also going to be another one at the end of the June quarter, so for another $50,000. So clearly the government is really trying desperately to keep as many people in employment as possible, because twofold. Number one, it means that they don't have to pay as much in the job seeker allowances, but also it keeps the country moving, it keeps the economy afloat, which clearly the government has an interest in as well.
Yeah. Okay, I've got another great question for you, Chris. If my employee is in self-isolation because they've been in contact with someone with COVID-19, but isn't sick themselves, can they take sick leave?
The answer on that one is no. If they're not physically sick and they're in a situation where, they're been in contact with someone and they have to self-isolate, or they've got a partner that's got COVID-19 and they have to isolate, it's either paid or unpaid leave. Now, in the situation that they are feeling okay today and in 2 days' time they come down with it too, then you'd probably reverse it and say, well, now that's sick pay. So you need to look at the situation itself. And at this stage, the advice is it's unpaid leave or paid leave.
Okay. Thank you.
Which is unfair to people. I got a situation the other day. Their friend came back from overseas and they have to self-isolate. And he's like, this person who's the friend doesn't have family at all, tragic circumstances, but one of those freak of things that this person can't live anywhere. They don't have the financial means to get a cheap hotel, nothing like that. So this person said, look, mate, and they've had to move out of their house. And luckily they can do that so they don't avoid this situation. Employers like, what do I do? Tell them to go live somewhere else. Otherwise, they're going to be on unpaid or paid leave. Simple as that. So that's happening a lot at the moment, and just be aware of your obligations there.
Okay. And then, so we've got someone on the line that has a business that has two divisions. One part is being closed down, the other part isn't. can they stand the first part down?
If that was for me, I didn't hear you, Troy. It just cut out there. I do
Yes, so
apologize.
Chris, this is for you. So we have someone that has a business that has two divisions. One part has been closed and shut down, the other one not. The part that's been closed down, can they be stood down?
Okay, so really great question. The analogy I'm using right now is a golf club, okay? You got a golf club that's got a bar where people go and have a beverage, and they've got a hospitality area, and then you've got the golf pro shop itself, okay? So the hospitality staff can be stood down if they're dedicated staff, and the question would be is if they can't be redeployed, they could be legally stood down, okay? The golf staff right now can't be, thankfully, because it can keep going with the swing. But they can't be stood down at this point if they can't be stood down because that's not mandated by government to do so. So there's a yes and a no answer there.
Okay. Yeah. So maybe that person. So after this, we will be sending out the recording. We'll also be sending out contact details. So if you did want to get into contact with Michelle or Chris or Warren today, there'll be the means for you to be able to do that. We just got another question here. What is the difference between rent reduction and rent rebate?
I'll probably answer that one. I think it literally is a tomato thing, I think, really. Whatever you call it, what you need to just get really clear on is it actually a rent reduction? Now, the nature of rent reduction is it is permanent. And in most instances, no landlord is going to be keen to have a permanent rent reduction arrangement. In fact, I had a client of mine who spoke to me yesterday about the fact that their rental agent came to them asking them to reduce the rent for their rental property. And I said, well, absolutely not as a permanent thing, because as soon as you reduce the rental as a permanent thing, that's straight away, that's devalued your asset significantly. What you can do is have a holiday for a period of time or a set period of time reduction in the rent. That might be where they're talking about this concept or this different wording of a rent rebate. The nature of it is you just need to be really clear that it is for a set period of time, and at the end of that period of time, the expectation is it goes back to what it was beforehand. I know that there's been some landlords who may actually even be saying, well, I'm just saying that it's a deferral of the rent. I will give you some time. I will simply give you more time to pay. I kind of feel like that might actually finish up being more problematic, because if they can't afford it now, they're not going to be able to afford it in 3 or 6 months' time. So I think you need to be realistic with these things. And if, once again, as the landlord, if you've given a discount on the rent, and I wouldn't probably in most instances be encouraging landlords to just give a rent-free period. I think that there's a really good argument for a rent reduction for these period of times, depending on the nature of the business, but try to avoid a holiday altogether. Once again, this is a case-by-case scenario. But I don't know how well you'll go with an expectation that if I've halved your rent, the other half, I'll get it back from you in 6 months' time. I think, I don't know how realistic is it. But once again, this concept of, as the landlord, if you do give that discount, then go to your bank and get a discount or a holiday or some concession in relation to any loan repayments relating to that property. So, and that way, I'll call it the hurt or the pain relating to that kind of gets spread along the line, and everyone's going to be okay. It's in everyone's best interest, and that includes the landlord, to actually keep a good tenant. So you would be better off giving a rent reduction rather than having the business go under and then you're out of rent for an extended period of time. I think this is where we've just got to keep being practical and fair across the board wherever we can.
Just take that further, Michelle, if I could. I agree with the issue about deferral of rents, deferral of loans, deferral of lots of things, because where we're up to at the moment is people talking about deferral to save cash now, and this is probably not a discussion fully for today. We want to be focused on how to get yourselves organised today with staff and today with cash. But remembering that the government has announced at this stage anyway, up to 6 months deferral of a whole lot of rules. But those rules are going to come to a cliff and they're all going to come back into place. Yep. And if people aren't in a good position, all they've done, as you were just alluding to, is deferring the problem to a later date when all these rules will be put back to the old times. Old times being pre-24th of March, which was this week, and the laws around insolvency and so forth will kick back in. So it's really important that if you are focusing on what you're doing, it's what Chris was saying before, and I think we're all saying, is be careful, be clear on where your business is up to, and cut quickly and early, because what you're spending now that you don't need to, you're going to have to make it up for a whole lot of other payments you're still committed to. And that's on top of the additional loans that the government are actually hoping to push through the banks, which you discussed earlier on. That's just an extra loan. It might be cheaper than some of the funding you've got at the moment, and it may not be, but it's extra debt.
That's right. And then so we're getting pretty much to the last question now. So feel free to put more questions in if you like. But Michelle, this one's for you. Looking forward, helping people manage or project their cash flow out. How are you helping people try and predict or to create a cash flow forecast in this environment?
Yeah, look, this environment is unprecedented. In the normal course of events, we would be talking to you about doing cash flows for 12 to 18 months, because that's probably as good as you can usually get with cash flow forecasting. We're now taking businesses back to, you need to be really on top of your weekly cash flows and understand what cash flows are happening on a daily basis now. Everything has changed. Everything is immediate. This is requiring immediate action. You can't be thinking about what's going to be happening in a month's time, because in a month's time, the universe is going to be different. And we need to be cognizant of that. Let's not bury our heads in the sand. Even if you've got a business that's not directly affected by any of this, when I'd probably challenge any industry that I would think would fall into that category, other than the medical profession. But everyone is going to be affected by this, and there's going to be long-term implications of this. But at the moment, the focus is on the now and survival. And when you're talking about the now and survival, you're not talking about 6 months cash flows. You're talking about, how do I get through to next week? How do I get through to next month? If you're starting to go beyond that, then good for you. But the world is changing on a dime, which is really scary, but it's really just about understand where your levers are, what can you change, and do what you can now while you can.
Yeah. And so my only addition to that would be look closely at your metrics. Everything from where are you getting your inquiries, what type of inquiries, who is it that you or your sales team are targeting in this environment. You want to make sure that you're spending your time usefully. Then as you're bringing on work, what are the metrics of that? Tracking all of your utilization, your hours, making sure jobs right now, they're not blowing out, you're not losing money on materials, that you are actually getting paid. Even in some environments, if you can start to ask for money much earlier in the process, because I see a lot of business owners, they're saying to me that they're very busy. That's great. Are you even going to get paid? So we want to make sure that if we are busy because of this environment, which there's plenty of people that are, what are you putting in place to make sure you get paid up front earlier, to make sure that you get paid? So step one, reduce your wages, reduce your expenses, but then from that point onwards, and Warren, you might elaborate on this, I think it's really important that how are we learning from this environment? What are some of the things we wish we did that we didn't do before this environment, due to this current environment? How are we going to come out of it? Who are you targeting right now that's potentially needing a lot of your help right now? And so, how can you positively make good use of this environment potentially? So it's good to have the scale down mindset. Once you've got those things in place, I think, just for the health of yourself, how are you looking forward? What's the future look like? What things can you start to do now so that in the next month or two, that you can really come out of this swinging?
No, I
Warren,
totally
do
agree
you
with
wanna-
what you're saying. Yeah, I totally agree with what you're saying. And we talked about this the other day a little bit, Troy, and I have been talking to a number of business owners about this, because a lot of business owners always want to make some form of change to their business. Now, we're all saying with what's going on, even what we're doing today, doing a Zoom conference, things are changing quickly and things will change forever out of this in some places. So it's a great opportunity, and if you can put it in those terms, for business owners to put in place the changes that they need to make anyway, because they're going to find that the marketplace and their staff are going to understand right now those changes need to be put in place for the survival. And a lot of the changes can be good changes for the longer term. And that is what Michelle was saying, budget daily, end of task daily, I was talking about before, get on the phone and be proactive and communicate with people more often, stand up meetings, quicker meetings, get end of task, have more energy in your leadership. I think this is a great opportunity. People just accept the fact that change has to happen now, use it.
Mm.
What systems can you put in place and can stay? What reductions can stay in place?
Yeah.
Sorry,
and what mechanisms and these stand-up meetings and people working remotely, you know, maybe some of these things are actually good for your business, and they're things that, you know, it might be going more paperless. And when you're not in the office with everyone right there, paper is no longer practical. Is this the opportunity that we needed to be able to go more paperless? It's going to force us to make decisions. But hey, maybe we need to look at the positives that we can get out of this. And I think this is probably the other thing. And what we are always managing with our clients at the same time and ourselves is, yes, there's the crisis, yes, there's the cash flow and all those business related things, but there's also the business's mindset. Yeah. And we need to try to keep a positive mindset. We need to keep things that are within our control, we need to control. We need to try to worry less about the things that are not inside our control, because there's no value and there's no point wasting your energy on that. So really try to keep that very positive focus and try to get that positive focus and that positive energy down to your teams as well. They're going to appreciate those messages. So I think that as leaders, we've got some real work to do on ourselves first and then in our business. And I think all of these things are just so important for us during these really tough times.
That's right. Okay, team, thank you very much. We've answered all of the questions, and so we're going to give everyone the opportunity to be able to connect with you. So if I was to summarize, I think if you don't have someone to talk to, you would talk to Michelle around your finances, around the government grants, and really crunching the numbers on that for you personally. Please contact Chris if you've got any questions around what to do with your staff, how to handle that process to make sure it's done right, both for yourself and for others. You know, on the flip side, as you do those, the scaling down things, then you can start to talk to Warren. You know, some people are contacting him because now's the right time to potentially buy or look forward to the future and what that looks like. If you're struggling with your systems, you know, getting your team to perform wirelessly whilst they're working at home, understanding your metrics and your key KPIs, and then even understanding and looking to the future, you know, what that might look like when you come out of it. Happy for you to contact me and have that conversation. So thank you very much, Warren, Michelle, and Chris for coming and sharing your time. Thank you everyone else for coming on the webinar, and all the information will be sent out to you depending on how fast Rob's little legs can run, but you know, latest probably you know, sometime later tonight we'll get it all out to you. But thank you very much for coming. And
thanks, Troy. Thanks for organising this, Troy. Really appreciate it.
Guys, thank you so much.
Anytime.
Take care, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks, Michelle. Thanks, Chris.